Good morning. Welcome to our Sunday morning devotional brought to you by Golden Isles Primitive Baptist Fellowship and HeartFloss.com. I'm Vernon Eckleberry, and momentarily I'll bring you a lesson entitled, When is Enough Enough? But first, here's Brenda to sing, Oh Love That Will Not Let Me Go.
That will not let me go. I rest my weary soul in thee. I give thee back the life I owe, that in thine ocean depths its flow may rich afford. O light that follows all my way, I yield my flickering torch to thee. My heart restores its borrowed ray, that in thy sunshine's blaze its day may brighter, fairer be. O joy that seekest me through pain, I cannot close my heart to thee. I chase the rainbow through the rain, and feel the promise is not vain, that morn shall tearless be.
Thank you, Brenda. That was absolutely beautiful. Oh, love that will not let me go. When is enough enough? Ellen Davis, a professor of theology at Duke University, wrote, Enough is enough, and more than enough is not better. Excess may in fact be contrary to the purposes of God. It is through living a life of excess that we begin to lose touch with reality and start to believe that we are the ones that sustain our lives. When Jacob, after 20 years, returned to Canaan, he met his estranged brother there on the plain, and he had brought gifts of herds of livestock because they had an enmity between the two, and Jacob hoped that his gift would help ease the tension. And this is the way the conversation went. Reading from Genesis chapter 33, verses 8 and 9 and 10. And he, that is Esau, said, What meanest thou by all this drove, all these herds, in other words, which I met? And he, that is Jacob, said, These are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. And Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand, for therefore I have seen thy face as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. Take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. So both Jacob and Esau knew that they had enough and had a grip on the reality that enough at some point is enough. After King Asa died in the southern kingdom of Judah, Jehoshaphat, his son, took the throne. We read that in 2 Chronicles 17:1. And Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his stead and strengthened himself against Israel. Israel was the arch rival of the southern kingdom of Judah. And things went so well, militarily, financially, materially, even spiritually, after Jehoshaphat took the throne. We read in verse 5 of that chapter, "Therefore the Lord established the kingdom in his hand, and all Judah brought to Jehoshaphat presents, and he had riches and honor in abundance." And it just continues to accumulate. Verse 11 reads, "And some of the Philistines brought Jehoshaphat presents and tribute silver, and the Arabians brought him flocks, 7,700 rams and 7,700 he-goats. And Jehoshaphat waxed great exceedingly, and he built in Judah castles and cities of store," that is, places to store all of his accumulating material possessions. "And he had much business in the cities of Judah, and the men of war, mighty men of valor, were in Jerusalem." So he had everything. If anyone ever had enough, it was King Jehoshaphat. But then the king does something that is totally puzzling. We read in chapter 18 of 2 Chronicles verse 1, "And Jehoshaphat had riches and honor in abundance." But what does he do? He joins affinity with Ahab. That is, he made an alliance with King Ahab of the northern kingdom. And so later on after that, we read in verse 2, "After certain years, he went down to Ahab to Samaria." And while he was there, Ahab talks him into going on a military exercise with him against Ramoth Gilead. And Jehoshaphat agreed. And it made absolutely no sense for Jehoshaphat to do that, other than this fact that Ramoth Gilead was a rich trade city on what was called the King's Highway that connected Africa and Mesopotamia. Now, afterward, Jehoshaphat continued to prosper even more. And then God delivered Judah from 3 great armies that had come against them to destroy Judah. And after that great deliverance by God, here's what we read that Jehoshaphat and his soldiers did. In the 19th, or rather the 20th chapter of 2 Chronicles, this is what happened there on the battlefield, where Judah didn't have to throw a spear or shoot an arrow. God had defeated the armies that had come against them. And in verse 25 of 2 Chronicles 20, here's what Jehoshaphat did. Jehoshaphat and his people came to take away the spoil of them. They found among them in abundance both riches with the dead bodies and precious jewels, which they stripped off for themselves, more than they could carry away. And so, they had enough. It was, of course, the custom that victorious armies took the spoil of their victory, but also it was a custom to leave that which would help the families, the mothers, the women, the wives, and the children of the fallen soldiers. But this is what Jehoshaphat and his people did. When they stripped off for themselves more than they could carry away, they were 3 days in gathering of the spoil. It was so much. So they made several trips to go back and get more and more. Now on the 4th day, they assembled themselves in the valley of Berachah, for there they blessed the Lord. Therefore the name of the place was called the Valley of Barakah unto this day. So now even more was added to Jehoshaphat's storehouses. But that's not the end of it. As we get toward the end of Jehoshaphat's life, he does something else that one is hard-pressed to find an explanation for, except that this weakness he had for material possessions caught up with him again. In the 20th chapter of 2 Chronicles, verse 35, we read, "And after this did Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, join himself with Ahaziah, king of Israel, who did very wickedly." Jehoshaphat just could not stay away from the kings of the northern kingdom of Israel, and the reason is always the same. This is what happened. He joined himself with him, that is, with the king of Israel. He joined himself with him to make ships to go to Tarshish. And they made the ships in Ezion-Geber. Now, why would Jehoshaphat want to go to Tarshish and get the king of Israel to help him with that? Well, we read why in 1 Kings chapter 22, verse 48, which is another account of this same event. Jehoshaphat made ships of Tarshish to go to Ophir for gold, but they went not, for the ships were broken at Ezion-Geber. So that was the motivation, to build the ships and go to Tarshish, because there was gold there. Just what Jehoshaphat needed more of. But now the Lord has had enough. For the Lord, enough of this was enough. And so we read in verse 37 of the 20th chapter of 2 Chronicles, then Eliezer, who was a prophet, prophesied against Jehoshaphat, saying, "Because thou hast joined thyself with Ahaziah, the Lord hath broken thy works." And that just simply means the Lord brought it to a halt. And the ships were broken, that they were not able to go to Tarshish. And then Jehoshaphat died. That's the last thing that we hear of him. Will Rogers said jokingly, "What's considered enough money? Just a little bit more." Unfortunately, that was Jehoshaphat's undoing. With all the great deeds that he performed, this was what we will remember of him at the last. Enough was never enough. And now may God be with you until we meet again.
You've been watching our Sunday morning devotional, presented by Golden Isles Primitive Baptist Fellowship. Please join us each Sunday morning at 9 a.m. for our Sunday morning devotional with Pastor Vernon Eckleberry.